The K'tharr Imperium, a civilization sculpted by the crushing pressures of Xylos's methane seas, held one truth above all others. Strategy reigned supreme. Millennia spent perfecting submersible warfare, logistical algorithms for resource allocation, in zero-visibility environments and psychological tactics to break enemy morale, had forged their identity. Every K'tharr hatchling was indoctrinated with the mantra, victory through calculation. Their every thought and action molded into a precise element within the Imperium's grand strategic design. Their cities, bioluminescent coral complexes, pulsating with a cold, efficient light, reflected this ethos. Every structure, every current of water, every school of genetically engineered nutrient fish served a purpose, contributing to the war machine that was the K'tharr Imperium. They saw the universe as a vast, complex game board, and believed their strategies would inevitably lead them to dominate all other players. This conviction, bordering on religious zeal, was about to be tested. Sergeant Miller, on the other hand, was remarkably unremarkable, stranded, captured. Definitely not part of anyone's grand strategy, least of all his own. His escape pod, a mangled piece of what was once a surveying vessel, had limped its way into K'tharr territory after a rather unfortunate encounter with a rogue asteroid, an incident Miller blamed entirely on the ship's aggressively optimistic, and now he found himself a prisoner in a holding cell that smelled vaguely of brine and disapproval. He scratched his head, a habit he'd picked up during long, boring space flights, and surveyed his surroundings. The walls were slick and green, pulsing faintly. The lighting was awful. Honestly, he'd seen better decorated bathrooms in spaceports. Miller wasn't exactly a soldier. He was more of a glorified space janitor with a knack for fixing broken things and an uncanny ability to find the best black market coffee in any sector. His uniform, now rumpled and stained, did little to inspire fear or respect. He just looked like a guy who'd had a really, really bad day. The K'tharr, of course, saw things differently. To them, no being arrived within their territory by accident. Every intrusion was a calculated maneuver, every individual an operative within a larger, more complex scheme, and this human, with his disarming grin and perpetually confused expression, was undoubtedly the key to a terrifying new strategy they had yet to decipher. Their initial scans of Miller revealed nothing of strategic value. No hidden weaponry, no cloaking devices, no cybernetic enhancements, just organs, lots of squishy, vulnerable organs. This only deepened their suspicion. Such blatant vulnerability had to be a ruse, a carefully constructed facade to mask his true purpose. The interrogation began swiftly, efficiently, and with the full force of K'tharr's strategic doctrine behind it. Miller was subjected to a battery of tests, scans, and probes, each designed to reveal his hidden agenda. He answered their questions with a shrug and a disarming lack of comprehension. Asteroid, you say? Yeah, big one. Messed up the flux capacitor or whatever that thing was called. His utter lack of concern baffled his captors. According to their calculations, he should be displaying fear, anxiety, or at least a modicum of self-preservation. Instead, he seemed more interested in the strange, glowing algae growing in the corner of his cell. Hey, you guys wouldn't happen to have any snacks, would you? I'm starving. The K'tharr High Command convened in their central strategic chamber, a vast echoing space where holographic projections of potential battle scenarios flickered and swirled. Admiral Krill, a veteran of countless submerged skirmishes, addressed the assembled officers. This human, he defies all logic. His weakness is unsettling. Another officer, his gills fluttering nervously, spoke up. Perhaps he is employing a strategy of reverse psychology, feigning incompetence to lull us into a false sense of security. Krill considered this, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. A plausible, if unconventional tactic. But what is his objective? What does he hope to gain? The answer, of course, was simple. All Miller wanted was a decent meal and a way back to the nearest spaceport. But the K'tharr, blinded by their unwavering belief in strategy, were about to embark on a wild goose chase that would shake the foundations of their imperium and introduce them to the terrifying power of cat videos. Miller, oblivious to The high-level strategic panic he was causing was settling into his captivity with a disturbing lack of urgency. He'd discovered that the strange, pulsating walls of his cell were surprisingly comfortable to lean against, and he'd even managed to convince one of the guard drones to bring him a cushion, after demonstrating, with elaborate hand gestures, that his spinal alignment was crucial for optimal cognitive function. The K'tharr, meticulously cataloging every interaction, noted this down as subject exhibiting unusual demands for environmental modification. His eating habits were another source of endless fascination and mounting suspicion. The K'tharr, who subsisted on nutrient-rich plankton paste dispensed at precise intervals, were utterly bewildered by Miller's obsession with what he called snacks. He'd managed to salvage a half-eaten bag of cosmic crunchies from his wrecked escape pod, and he guarded it with a ferocity that suggested it was a vital piece of military hardware. The K'tharr watched in morbid fascination as Miller devoured, the bright orange, vaguely spherical objects occasionally offering cryptic commentary. Ah, cosmic crunchies, artificially flavored nebula dust probably, but hey, it's got that satisfying crunch. He would then proceed to shake the bag upside down, trying to get every last speck of neon-colored dust. The contrast between Miller's relaxed demeanor and the K'tharr's rigid protocols was stark, to say the least. While they communicated through complex bioluminescent signals and meticulously structured verbal exchanges, Miller seemed content to mumble to himself or engage in one-sided conversations with the unresponsive guard drones. So, you guys like sports? I'm a big fan of, well, pretty much anything with explosions. The drones naturally remained silent, their optical sensors blinking in unison. The K'tharr's daily routine was a symphony of precisely timed drills, strategic simulations, and mandatory meditation sessions focused on achieving peak tactical awareness. Miller's day, on the other hand, consisted of sleeping, eating cosmic crunchies, attempting to decipher the K'tharr's written language, which looked suspiciously like a particularly complex plumbing diagram, and trying to convince the guard drones to play charades. Okay, I'm a large hairy creature. I swing from trees, and I really like bananas. The drones, unimpressed, simply adjusted the nutrient paste dispenser. This casual disregard for established procedure was deeply unsettling to the K'tharr. They couldn't fathom why a being who was presumably a highly trained operative would behave with such utter lack of discipline. Was it a sign of unparalleled confidence? A subtle form of psychological warfare? Or was this human simply an idiot? The possibility was almost too terrifying to contemplate. Admiral Krill, his gills practically vibrating with frustration, summoned the Imperium's chief xenopsychologist. "Explain this behavior," he demanded, projecting a holographic image of Miller attempting to juggle 3 cosmic crunchies in his cell. Is this some form of coded communication? A complex ritual designed to undermine our resolve? The xenopsychologist, a frail, ancient K'tharr with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of 1,000 submerged battles, studied the image intently. "Admiral," he said slowly, I believe this human is bored." Krill recoiled, as if he'd been physically struck. "Bored? But we are at war. There is no room for boredom in strategic operations." The xenopsychologist simply shrugged, a gesture that seemed almost blasphemous in the rigid hierarchy of the K'tharr Imperium. "Perhaps," he said, "that is his strategy." The Admiral paused, his brow furrowed. "So, the human is feigning boredom to disarm us? Or," the xenopsychologist continued, "the human is actually bored, and we are trying to make it into something much more." The room went silent with the realization that the idea was too ridiculous to be considered. Yet that was the only explanation that made any sense. The senior K'tharrs were disturbed to their very core. The turning point came during what the K'tharr designated Interrogation Cycle 729. Miller, as usual, was uncooperative, offering only vague pronouncements and requests for more cosmic crunchies. Then, seemingly at random, he pulled a small, rectangular device from his pocket. It was old, cracked, and held together with what appeared to be brightly colored adhesive strips, but it hummed with a faint, internal light. The K'tharr, who had been monitoring Miller's every move with advanced surveillance technology, immediately identified the device as a potential weapon. Its energy signature was unusual, erratic, unpredictable. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. "That's it," crackled the voice of Commander Grill. "The surrender device. Prepare for immediate containment." Miller, completely oblivious, simply pressed a button on the side of the device. The screen flickered to life, displaying a cat. A fluffy, ginger cat, batting playfully at a dangling string. The K'tharr watched in stunned silence as the cat chased its tail, pounced on imaginary prey, and generally engaged in feline shenanigans. Then the video changed to another, and another, each more absurd than the last. Cats riding Roombas, cats squeezing into tiny boxes, cats inexplicably terrified of cucumbers. Accompanying these moving images were strange, repetitive noises, high-pitched meows, jaunty musical jingles, and the occasional burst of canned laughter. The K'tharr, whose entire culture was built on logic, strategy, and unwavering discipline, were utterly baffled. They couldn't comprehend the purpose of these moving images. Was it some form of hypnotic suggestion? A subliminal attack on their cognitive functions? Or something far more sinister? The leading scientists of the K'tharr were flummoxed. The effect on the K'tharr was immediate and unsettling. The guard drones, normally stoic and unblinking, began to emit a series of confused clicks and whirs. Commander Grill, watching from the observation deck, felt a strange tingling sensation in his gills. He couldn't explain it, but he found himself amused. The absurdity of the situation was somehow compelling. He'd never experienced anything remotely similar. Even Admiral Krill, a veteran of countless interstellar conflicts, couldn't help but stare at the screen with a mixture of confusion and morbid fascination. He felt a strange, unfamiliar impulse to giggle. He immediately crushed it down, of course. A highly trained military leader cannot simply be seen giggling at felines on primitive display screens. But the seed had been planted. As Miller continued to scroll through his seemingly endless collection of cat videos, the K'tharr's carefully constructed reality began to unravel. Their rigid protocols, their unwavering belief in their own superiority, their very understanding of the universe, all were threatened by the sheer, unadulterated silliness emanating from Miller's surrender device. The universe as they knew, it was crumbling before their very eyes. The K'tharr weren't ones to back down easily. What started as baffled confusion quickly morphed into outright suspicion. Miller, they reasoned, was clearly using this surrender device to mask his true intentions. They simply needed to decipher the code, unlock the secrets hidden within the endless stream of feline absurdity. The interrogations intensified, growing longer and more probing. Commander Grill, his patience wearing thinner than a micron-thin algae wafer, addressed Miller directly, his voice echoing through the interrogation chamber. "Human Miller," he stated, his bioluminescent markings flashing in angry crimson. "Explain the function of this cat." Miller, mid-yawn, scratched his head. Well, Commander, it's a cat. You know, a furry little predator. Kinda like a scaled-down version of your, training drones, I guess." The K'tharr, however, refused to accept such a simplistic explanation. They believed that the surrender device was a key to understanding Miller's strategy, a tool to exploit their weaknesses. They pressed him for answers, demanding to know the strategic significance of each purr, each meow, each inexplicable obsession with cardboard boxes. Miller just shrugged. "It's just entertainment, guys, like a distraction." The concept of entertainment was, it turned out, completely foreign to the K'tharr. Their lives revolved around duty, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of military dominance. The idea of deliberately engaging in activities for the sole purpose of amusement was utterly alien to them. To them, everything had a strategic purpose. Everything. This lack of understanding became the crux of the interrogation. The K'tharr, unable to grasp the concept of meaningless fun, became increasingly convinced that Miller was withholding vital information. Their confusion grew with each passing interrogation, fueled by the strange, illogical imagery emanating from the surrender device. It defied all tactical analysis. Admiral Krill, observing the interrogation remotely, began to question his own sanity. He'd stared into the black heart of nebulae, commanded fleets through asteroid storms, and negotiated peace treaties with sentient gas clouds. Yet this human, with his ridiculous device and his infuriating nonchalance, was proving to be his greatest challenge. "Increase the pressure," Krill ordered his subordinates, his voice tight with frustration. "We must break through his facade. There has to be a logical explanation for all of this." The interrogation chamber hummed with renewed energy as the K'tharr implemented a new series of techniques, each designed to crack Miller's resolve and expose his hidden strategy. The K'tharr rolled out their heavy artillery, so to speak. They subjected Miller to sensory deprivation, bombarded him with logical paradoxes, and even attempted to extract information through neural probes. Miller, however, remained unfazed, responding to their increasingly desperate measures with a mix of boredom and sarcastic amusement. Throughout the escalating interrogation, Miller remained oddly calm. He continued to request cosmic crunchies, ask about the K'tharr's strange reproductive habits, and of course watch his cat videos. His insouciance only served to infuriate the K'tharr, who became more and more convinced that they were dealing with a cunning, dangerous enemy. The K'tharr were walking right into Miller's trap. He was playing them, feigning naivety while they squirmed, attempting to analyze a device that had no deeper meaning. The K'tharr were getting closer to the truth, but their utter lack of understanding of entertainment was preventing them from comprehending it. As the interrogations intensified, the balance of power subtly shifted. The K'tharr, once confident and in control, became increasingly desperate and confused. Miller, the seemingly powerless prisoner, held the key to their unraveling, a key hidden within the innocent, absurd world of cat videos. He was merely enjoying the show. The moment of truth arrived not with a bang but with a frustrated sigh from Miller. He was tired, hungry, and frankly, bored. "Look," he drawled, leaning back in his uncomfortable, algae-based chair. "It's just a phone, okay? A smartphone. It plays videos, it has games, you can order pizza with it back on Earth." He held up the device, tapping the screen to bring up a particularly absurd video of a cat riding a Roomba while dressed as a shark. "See? Cat, shark, vacuum cleaner." Hilarity ensues. That's it. There's no secret code, no hidden strategy, just stuff. Commander Grill stared, his multifaceted eyes twitching. "Stuff?" he echoed, the word sounding alien and nonsensical in the sterile interrogation chamber. He gestured to a junior officer. "Analyze the stuff." The officer, equally bewildered, approached the device with trepidation, his manipulator claws hovering over the screen. Miller watched, a smirk playing on his lips, as the officer tentatively touched the screen. Instantly, the video sprang to life, the absurd scene unfolding in all its glory. The Roomba whirred, the cat meowed indignantly, and a jaunty, synthesized tune played in the background. The officer recoiled as if he'd been stung. The problem wasn't the technology itself. The K'tharr were perfectly capable of understanding screens, data streams, and even the basic concept of moving images. Their vulnerability lay in the utter pointlessness of it all. Their entire civilization was built on logic, efficiency, and strategic calculation. The concept of entertainment simply didn't compute. Their brains, hardwired for military precision and resource management, couldn't process the idea of deliberately engaging in something that served no practical purpose. It was a glitch in, their programming, a blind spot in their cultural understanding. They couldn't comprehend that humans often did things simply because they were amusing. The surrender device, as they called it, wasn't a weapon. It was a distraction, a time waster, a repository of silly videos, addictive games, and vapid, social media feeds. And because the K'tharr couldn't understand its lack of purpose, they were utterly defenseless against its effects. It was like trying to fight a sneeze with a spreadsheet. The games on Miller's phone, with their bright colors, simple objectives, and constant reward loops, were particularly insidious. The K'tharr, accustomed to complex simulations and long-term strategic planning, found themselves strangely drawn to the immediate gratification offered by games like Candy Crush and Angry Birds. The cat videos, of course, were another level of bewilderment entirely. The K'tharr, a species with no concept of domesticated animals, couldn't fathom the human obsession with these small furry creatures. They couldn't understand why anyone would spend hours watching videos of cats chasing lasers, batting at yarn, or squeezing themselves into boxes. As Miller watched the K'tharr squirm, he realized the full extent of his accidental advantage. He wasn't a prisoner of war. He was a cultural weapon. He wasn't a soldier. He was a walking, talking meme generator. And the K'tharr Imperium, for all its military might, was about to fall victim to the most powerful force in the universe: human boredom. Chaos erupted within the K'tharr command structure faster than a startled squid could ink. The initial bewilderment quickly morphed into fascination, then obsession. High-ranking officers who had spent their lives studying complex battle strategies found themselves glued to Miller's phone, mesmerized by the endless stream of cat videos and brightly colored games. Commander Girill, the epitome of K'tharr stoicism, was the first to fall. He initially dismissed the surrender device as an illogical curiosity. But after a few minutes of watching a cat attempt to catch a laser pointer, a strange twitch developed in his eye. Soon he was surreptitiously sneaking glances at the screen, muttering about the cat's strategic inefficiency, while secretly admiring its tenacity. The addiction spread like a virus through the K'tharr ranks. Training exercises were neglected, strategic planning sessions were replaced with impromptu gaming tournaments, and the once impeccable uniforms of the K'tharr military became stained with algae snacks and the residue of frantic finger-swiping. The strict protocols that had defined their society for millennia crumbled under the weight of mindless entertainment. The K'tharr's rigid adherence to logic and efficiency had left them utterly unprepared for the addictive power of human entertainment. They were like robots discovering emotions for the first time, overwhelmed by the sheer novelty of it all. They couldn't resist the dopamine rush of a high score, the satisfaction of watching a cat perform an absurd feat, or the simple pleasure of wasting time. Miller watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. He had stumbled upon a weakness in the K'tharr armor, a cultural blind spot that rendered them helpless against the onslaught of Earth's most vapid exports. It was like discovering that the universe's most fearsome warriors were allergic to kittens. Seizing the opportunity, Miller calmly stood up, stretched, and strolled towards the unguarded exit. The K'tharr, lost in their digital world of cat videos and in-app purchases, barely noticed his departure. He could practically hear the collective sigh of contentment as another level of Candy Crush was conquered. The corridors, once filled with the click-clack of marching K'tharr soldiers, were now eerily silent, punctuated only by the tinny sounds of mobile games and the occasional burst of laughter. The K'tharr Imperium, once a symbol of unwavering military might, was now a daycare center for digital addicts. Freedom beckoned. Miller, with a smirk, made his way to the nearest escape pod, leaving behind a civilization teetering on the brink of cultural collapse. As he launched into the inky blackness of space, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen to the K'tharr. Would they eventually overcome their addiction, or would they remain forever enslaved to the whims of human entertainment? He chuckled. Either way, he wouldn't be around to see it. Miller's escape was almost anticlimactic. He simply walked away, a ghost in a world suddenly too preoccupied to notice him. He hotwired a small transport ship, a skill he'd picked up during a particularly boring stint in the Earth Space Corps, and set a course for the nearest neutral territory, whistling a jaunty tune. Back on the K'tharr homeworld, the situation continued to deteriorate. Military drills were canceled, replaced by marathon gaming sessions. Strategic war rooms became dens of illicit streaming, and the once feared K'tharr battleships sat, idle in orbit, their crews engrossed in virtual farming simulations. The Imperium's legendary discipline had evaporated, leaving behind a society hooked on the instant gratification of digital entertainment. The K'tharr, a species that had conquered galaxies through meticulous planning and unwavering resolve, were now losing battles to virtual puzzles and simulated livestock. The impact on their military was devastating. Response times slowed to a crawl as officers struggled to tear themselves away from their games. Battle strategies were replaced with impulsive, poorly thought-out maneuvers inspired by the logic of mobile game advertising. Their once feared reputation crumbled faster than a poorly constructed digital castle. The K'tharr Imperium, once poised to dominate the galaxy, was now struggling to maintain basic societal functions. The proud warrior race was now a civilization of screen-addicted invertebrates, their dreams of galactic conquest replaced by the endless pursuit of virtual rewards and digital distractions. And so, the great K'tharr Imperium inadvertently surrendered, not to a superior military force but to the irresistible allure of human entertainment. Their reign of terror was over, not with a bang, but with the gentle chime of a notification and the triumphant squeal of a cartoon pig. Years later, Earth found itself in an unexpected position. Galactic superpower, not through military might, but through the insidious power of entertainment. Funny cat videos, addictive mobile games, and even the most mundane reality TV shows became Earth's most potent export. Militaristic empires across the cosmos, once terrifying in their efficiency, found their ranks riddled with digital distraction. Invasion plans were sidelined for high scores, and galactic domination took a backseat to unlocking the next level. And Sergeant Miller? Well, he became something of an accidental hero. Not that he knew or cared. He was last seen on a tropical beach sipping a cosmic cocktail, blissfully unaware that he'd inadvertently saved the galaxy, one cat video at a time. He probably wouldn't even remember if you asked him. He was just too busy enjoying his early retirement, a lazy legend in the annals of intergalactic history.